And I'd like to welcome Tessa Dwyer from the Academy of American Poets to say a few words about the Academy and the Poets Forum.
Speeches have much to learn from haikus. Good evening, I'm Tessa Dwyer, Chairman of the Board of the Academy of American Poets, and I'm thrilled to be here tonight in the official capacity of thanking everybody at the Dodge Poetry Festival for making all of this magic happen. But I'm also here in a much simpler role, that of misplaced Jersey girl, happy to be back in Newark, and also as a fangirl of so many of these amazing poets. Many of them are chancellors of the Academy of American Poets, and our mission is to support poets at every stage of their career, even before they have a career or whether they have a career in poetry. We're there, as is Dodge. So as we know, over the next few days, thousands of young people will come through NJPAC and other venues created by Dodge programs and their teachers, and they will experience, some for the very first time, the collective genius of American poetry today. Just imagine how that opens portals. Last year, 18 million people from around the world came searching to poets.org, literally searching to poets.org, and we take that as a sign among many that there's a voracious and growing appetite for American poetry. And that reminds us of just enormous gratitude that we have for everybody in the room. As much as the poets touch our hearts, I know from working with them how much everybody here touches theirs by that active and devoted listening. In the words of Joy Harjo, a great sax player, by the way, without poetry, we lose our way. And I want to thank all of the poets here tonight for showing us their true north. And in the words of Janina Broski, raising our higher expectations even higher. Speeches have much to learn from haikus, so I'm going to end channeling my inner Marilyn Chin, because I hope I look like her. And I will say, me go, you stay, 2 autumns.
Thank you. We're grateful to the Academy for their partnership over these years. And I have to name a few people from the poetry program who may be here. I can't tell if they're in the audience. Isabel Gonzalez, the Assistant Director of the program, is she here? Victoria Russell, Beatrice Bueno, David Mayu, Wendy Barron, Clarice Simmons. These people just work. Enough said. Our first poet for the second half, Terrence Hayes.
All right, y'all. Thanks, Martin. It's good to be here. Y'all, I did not bring my reading glasses that I didn't need before, so I printed it out big, so I think I'll be able to see it. 2 paragraphs and half a poem. That's what I got for you. So here's the first paragraph. It's about Bob Kaufman. That's all I can tell you. So everything that sounds weird in it is me messing around with him. He was a merchant marine. He circled the globe 9 times, that kind of stuff. Okay, so here's a paragraph. Bob Kaufman. When Bob Kaufman dies, age 60, in 1986, from a condition in which the liver does not live properly due to long-term trauma, The ghost he meets traveling the road from San Francisco back to New Orleans call him the Buddha fly because he's pajamaed in a burlap robe. He holds a quill made of a crow feather in his writing hand and a writhing crow in the other, a transient cloud defecting to God while lambasting the fifth commandment, like Noah shipwrecked and gnawing his nails with his wisdom teeth. Kaufman was thin as a skeleton transported to the realm of symbolic meaning. It was the middle of a triple-digit July. A gate swung between cafe excursions and nights of smothered rage, spontaneous revelations exploding into birdland saxophone riffs, black rain falling on the snow, maternal rain falling from a sky crackling with eclipses, commuted bluenesses, footpaths hidden beneath shadows, shivers impaled on slivers of wind and silver traffic, impaled on nautical sounds of weeping and sweating. The metaphysical tongue bounced up and down like a merchant marine counting vultures and stars from the deck of a sinking ship in the mouth of Bob Kaufman. He wouldn't put the quill or crow down, even when the ghost offered him shade and drinkable sea. All right, so here's the half a poem. The first half of this poem is about Matisse's blue. And then I started trying to write about Picasso's blue, but I just got stuck on this idea of his very first drawing. Envoy of Picasso's blue. The first drawing Pablo Picasso made as a toddler with a single blue crayon on onion skin made his father, an average painter, weep. And weep again, showing the drawing to Picasso's mother, who also wept. The drawing was said to have been lost after the death of Picasso's sister, Conchita, of diphtheria when the family moved to Barcelona, but it reappeared years later, somewhere you'd never expect. To truly grasp any of Picasso's later work, you should know whether his sister's death conjured a bird and bullseye view of loss and faith, and if the experience instilled a constant, mysterious feeling in him, whether everything that happened to the artist before age 9 or 10, or even 9 or 10 in the morning, influences whether an instrument is held like a tool or weapon sometimes. Loss, like desire, is always in the eye of the maker and beholder. Picasso, of course, grew to make many more haunted, perceptive scenes. But the stranger who found the drawing had no idea who'd made it. Only that the line in blue crayon on onion paper conjured a mysterious feeling in him. It looked somehow like a perfectly drawn landscape, said the neighbor, resting his wiry hand on his garden fence, thinking the stranger showing him the drawing in the middle of the day, slightly stranger than he thought before. Returning to his dirt when the stranger left, the neighbor felt something come over his eyes, a quixotic quaking in all his blind spots. He spent the rest of his days trying to describe that feeling. It was a depiction of the body's geometries, the eye doctor replied when the stranger asked his opinion. He sent the stranger home after an inconclusive eye exam and then went home to bed himself. The doctor closed his eyes around his tears and slept for 6 or 7 days, dreaming of nudes posing before a surgeon with a palette knife. When the stranger got home and showed the drawing to his wife, she said it was clearly a portrayal of liberty. The artist making the presence of God, she explained. The artist marking the presence of God, she explained, pausing over the thickest of the lines and asking why and which heartbreaks can conjure the opposite of faith and time. Her hair, the stranger noticed, was no longer as it was when she was his bride. Blind spots always leave a stain, the wife said after dinner, though the stranger had long put the drawing away. She kept trying to describe what she'd seen. How not to disappear completely, she said, lying in bed while her husband, the stranger, saw the drawing burning in a nightmare. It was clearly a tale about slaves, the artist suffering a notion of color. The wife cried herself to sleep that night and dreamed she was being covered in waves of salt water and gold, the ephemera of souls lost between African and American shores, a blue between the sky and the devil's shark parlor. Lovely as the loveliest of the sisters, to leap into the waters and live free as the bride of the sea. All right. This is the second paragraph. Tomorrow is I's birthday, and so this one's about I. Born October 31st. So, and I'm gonna read it for you. So it's AI, I, the poet, and it's all mostly true. I kept cats because she could be lonely. I rode the feathers of a comet into the world. Wearing a wedding dress, I buried Mama in a wedding dress and delivered her eulogy crying in a dream. I could be Japanese, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and black because of a scandalous affair. I could be Irish, Southern Cheyenne, Comanche, and black. I was Tucson at a crossroads. I was Florence Anthony in Texas. Carolyn Wright said I bought a turquoise necklace. I was a moonshine stained with the twilight of June in Oklahoma. In California, I was disguised as a poem in the pocket of a Catholic schoolgirl uniform. I could be Miguel Hernandez, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Cesar Vallejo, you or me. I could be Yasunori Kawabata talking to his reflection in a shallow pond. In the blues, the singer is often guilty. In opera, there's often murder in a song. Wearing a kimono, I buried her father crying in a dream. I said, I absorbed you through my skin. I wrote Cruelty in 1973 and Sin in 86. I wouldn't buy you the tiara because she could be mean. She wouldn't buy it because she watched her money carefully. I wrote Fate in 1991 and Greed in 93. I said Jesus walked on his mother's body to be the king of heaven. I could be the blackest soul in the Bible, the bride of the prophet, the least remembered disciple. I lived it. I could be within earshot of a cat call or eyeballing another poet's boondoggle. I lie in a shoebox on a brown leather high-back chair. I lie in the bottom of a cracked glass on a cluttered counter. I lie on earth. I lie on the magic carpet. I parked an old maroon Ford in a field outside El Reno. I was wing up on the sideboard of the old car. I was side saddle to the headstrong odor of a ghost. I'm on my way to work, I said. When I run off, you start after me.
Terrence Hayes. Our next poet is Major Jackson.
Good evening. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, poets. Thank you, readers, especially thank you, readers. I want to read this poem because during the craft discussion today, someone during the Q&A said, I heard an editor say, I could die happy if I never read another grandmother poem again. This is a grandmother poem. It's called Making Things. Suddenly, I had to skewer all my prayers and slow roast them in the open-aired kitchen of my imagination. I had to shovel fire into my laughter and keep my eyes from blinking. I had to fuss like my grandmother simmering storms, flour on a wooden island, pans lined with parchment, cast iron skillets, and whisk fleck gravy. I had to move like a ballet dancer, but without the vanity and self-consciousness of tradition. I had to blur my scars so I could write into time and carry the sensation of walking like a morose and heavy American sporting a yellow jacket across Pont Saint-Michel. I want to be all razzle-dazzle before the dark cloak one arrives for a last game of chess. My font of feelings is a waterfall, and I live as if no toupees exist on earth, or masks that silence the oppressed, or anything that does not applaud the sycamore's tribute to the red flame, like the heat beneath my grandmother's pots, who never raised a ghost but a storm. So look at me standing on the porch, laughing at the creek, threatening to become a raging river. Last night, I had the pleasure of spending the evening with my son Langston and my daughter Anastasia. And they are adult children, and as a parent, at some point you realize you can't walk with them the whole time of their life, that they're going to experience things. I had this memory of them 2 months ago of us on a beach. The nature of memory. Once again, I'm trying to fall into the light, twice broken and knife-scarred, recalling my children on Long Beach Island, loose sand and Anastasia's dreads, Langston holding a red plastic shovel in one hand and the sword-like tail of a horseshoe crab in another, shorebirds winging above their heads. If there is another world, a poet struggles to describe ocean mist dissipating over a young father, distant and lonely, watching his children's laughter run into the sea, then explode at the edge of the world. What is my life but a constant churning, a constant entering into a dizzying churn of days, ping-ponging like numbered balls in a glass air machine? Then, as now, like all of us, I was brought here through a clumsy series of human foibles, and thus am conditioned to read the underside of storms edging up a coast. Someday, they too will push down far enough and learn to unfold the minutes and hours into one long continuous wave. For now, I hope they love themselves loudly as that day, light drunk, kicking up sand. And finally, this is, it must be the supermarket in me. It's an extended metaphor. It must be the supermarket in me, all lit from inside, full of wide aisles and thoughtful shelf stocking, where you'll find my feelings and memories. That's why on the outside I look so ordered and put together. My inner supermarket contains an old world butcher shop and a fish market. Shoppers arrive with an unfathomable hunger, which I relieve by offering freshness, quality, and value. Some are penniless and can only fantasize, licking their lips at rows of artisanal cheeses and meats behind glass display cases, the cloth-bound bries and goat at ropes of cured salami and prosciutto. Still, they taste. I offer free samples at stations throughout my supermarket so people will come to know and like me. In the produce department, many test my pears and avocados for ripeness. In the floral area, they sniff. Some walk off with my bouquets. I contain cheerful baggers who will escort you to your car. At times, truthfully, I dislike this about myself, forever accommodating. I've not always had a supermarket in me. It began when the church in me lost its congregation. and when I lost my mother's love to cocktails and other stimulants. There is no place for anger in my supermarket. I keep it in the back room with a sign that reads, "No trespassing, employees only." It's a way of being in the world, a cell full of checkout lines and refrigerators, until someone runs through you, knocking down pyramids of canned goods, or panic shopping, leaving empty aisles. Thank you.
Major Jackson. Our next poet is Yusef Komanyaka.
That should be fine. It is so great to be here to celebrate poetry at the Deutsch Festival again. Yes. I'm going to read two poems. A world of daughters. Say like clean that birth say, weeping in the tall grass where this tantalizing song begins. Birds perch on the crooked branch. Over a grave of an unending track into the valley of cooling waters. Lessons of earth. Oh, questions I'm more the first tongue say. I have gone back, says the oracle, counting seasons and centuries, undoing fault lines between one generation and next, as she twirls sackcloth edged with pollen. And one glimpses what one did not know, say, this is where the goat was asked to speak legends ago, to kneel and deliver a sacrifice. To feel the truth depends on how and why the singer's song fits into the mouth. Well, I believe the borrowed rib story is the other way round, entangled in decree, blessing, law, and myth, one only has to listen to night-long pleas of a mother who used all thousand chants and prayers of clay, red ochre, blown from the mouth upon the high stone wall, retracing a founder land bridge to Wishbone. My own two daughters and granddaughter, the three know how to work praise and lament, ready to sprout wings of naked flight and labor, yes, hinge into earth. We rose from Lucy to clan, from clan to tribe, and today we worship her sun-polished bones, remembering she is made of questions. No, Mama is not always a first word before counting eggs in the cowbird's nest. He begins in memory. Now, say her name. Say Dankness, mother of us all. And the second poem is Blue Dementia. In the days when a man could hold a swarm of words inside his belly, nestled against his spleen, singing. In the days of night riders, when life tongued to read to blues and sorrow song, call out of the deep night, another man done gone, another man done gone. In the days when one could lose oneself all up inside love this way, and then moan on the bone till God's cried out in someone's sleep. Today, already I've seen 3 dark-skinned men discussing the weather with demons and angels, gazing up at the clouds and squinting down into iron grates along the 5 streets of luminous encounters. I double-check my reflection in plate glass and wonder, am I passing another Lucky Thomason or Marion Brown, cornered by blue dementia? Another dark-skinned man who rose up dreaming one morning and then walked out of himself dreaming? Did this one dare to step on a crack in a sidewalk, to turn a midnight corner and never come back whole? Or did he try to stare down a look that shoved the blade into his heart? I mean, I know something about night riders and catgut. Yeah, honey, I know something about talking with ghosts. Thank you.
Yusuf Komanyaka. The second piece that Yusuf read, Blue Dementia, is actually going to be included in a poetry and music collaboration that he wrote with the blues guitarist and composer Thomas Donker. It's a sequence of songs and poems called Endangered, and it's going to be featured on Saturday afternoon along with 8 other poets speaking to the same subject, which is how we are in various ways endangered, in the present time. So come back Saturday for that. Our next poet is Stephen Kuzisto.
All right. So if I magnify the print on this iPad to an incredibly large, I can read with one eye. And that's much better than hearing me read from Braille, because I'm the slowest Braille reader in the United States. And so if I read from Braille, it would be like that old Monty Python skit called Bad Conceptual Art. And I don't want to do that. Many of you probably know that disability poetry is really coming on strong now. And it's an incredible moment. And I just want to acknowledge that many of us in the disability community have come to use the term Crips for ourselves because we're really awake and we're militant. And we're putting out our elbows. This first poem is really, in many respects, my response to something Kurt Vonnegut once wrote. I guess I can pull this down, can't I? Kurt Vonnegut once wrote in the early 1970s that the opening lines of Allen Ginsberg's Howl, that canonical poem, were ridiculous. And of course, he's referring to, I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed. And Vonnegut says, correct me if I'm wrong, but when he wrote that, he was a graduate student at Columbia. no one would ever think to look for the best minds in any generation in an English department. Then he went on to say, the smart people are in physics. That has bothered me for years. The poem is dedicated to Carl Solomon, who Vonnegut befriended while incarcerated in a lunatic asylum. If you were queer, if you were trans, if you were neurodivergent in the 1950s and well into the early 80s, you would be locked up in the United States. And you would be lobotomized or electrofried into senescence. So Vonnegut didn't understand that, and he made a cheap joke. But Ginsberg was absolutely right. He saw minds destroyed. So this is my little homage and reflection to the ghost of Allen Ginsberg. America, with your history of eugenics, with your hostility to the Global Charter on Disability Rights, with your jails stocked with psychiatric patients, worse than the Soviet Union. We are Gulag Los Angeles, Gulag Rikers Island, Gulag 5 Points in upstate New York. America, with your young Dr. Mengelas, with your broken VA, with your war on food stamps and infant nutrition, with your terror of autism and lack of empathy for those who have it, with your 80% unemployment rate for people with disabilities, with your pity parties, inspiration porn, Billy was broken until we gave him a puppy, with your sanctimonious low drivel disguised as empathy, with your terror of reasonable accommodations, with your NPR essays about fake disability fraud, which is derision of the poor and elderly, with your dysophobia. I wouldn't want one of them to sit next to me on a bus. America, when will you admit you have a hernia? When will you admit you're a lousy driver? Admit you miss the days of those segregated schools, hospitals, residential facilities. Just keep them out of sight. When will you apologize for your ugly laws? When will you make Ron Kovic's book irrelevant? America, you threatened Allen Ginsberg with lobotomy. America, you medicated a generation of teenagers for bipolar depression when all they were feeling was old-fashioned fear. When will you protect wheelchairs on airlines? When will you admit you're terrified of luck? I really love Vonnegut, but he got that one way wrong. Or as they say in the baseball movie, just a little bit outside. I just wrote this. Every trip I take with the guide dog is really it's a bet that I'll make it, right? So Death in the Afternoon, Hemingway, he's got, I got more than him. For me, it's a thing, right? Walking home from the drugstore with my guide dog, antidepressants rattling in my pocket. Crossing the street in hot traffic, the pills make a mariachi sound, as if we're at a party and not plunging blindly into the hopscotch faith game called being alive, going places. Shick, shick go the pills, which are made for those without faith. Shick, shick, under the shimmering sun, as if a countdown has started. Treatise. I was alone in a room with a radio, a dog, and a glass of water. That's how it was. There was a chair, a bed, the usual hotel furnishings. My connecting flight had been canceled, and it was toward midnight. The hotel was in a rundown part of the city. Then it was, as we say in the vernacular, I had to take the dog out. My guide dog wearing her leather harness, me wearing track shoes and a rumpled business suit. Out we went. First into a hallway that smelled of soap flakes, then up to street level, a strange arrangement, hard to explain, then down a corridor filled with plastic ferns until we reached a parking lot, the only place to take the dog, or so I'd been told, and there we were, standing in the nowhere of blindness, that beautiful nothing with its hope and autonomy and its private song shared between man and animal, the oldest song on earth. And I thought I would close with this one poem. Bear with me here a second. It's a little different than turning pages in a book, as you all know. So this is a prose poem. My early childhood was in Finland, and I may move back there if things keep going the way they're going here. This is a little poem called Sand. It's a prose poem. I woke to the waves and sand and realized I'd been dreaming of my father. We were in Finland back in the late 50s, a time when it seemed people didn't laugh. The water had to do all the laughing in those days. Clouds watched the children. There were very few televisions. I remember the adults reading books by the sea. The ocean was everyone's philosopher. Those were beautiful days. Everyone had his cup of sand. Thank you very much. Okay, this way?
Steve Kuzisto, and Caitlin. Our next poet is Amy Nzukumatato.
Hello and good evening, everyone. I've never followed I've actually followed dogs before, and Stephen, you gave us a great reading, but Caitlin takes the cake for being the cutest. In honor of all the years that Dodge has been in existence, I thought I would read a haiku for each year, just very, very quick. No, I'm not. I heard a gasp over there, like, no, I will never do that for you. But I'm going to read one. It's a poem. It's the first singer. Who would do that? 20-something haikus? No. I'm going to read a poem. It's the first Mississippi singer I learned when I moved to Mississippi. And I'm not going to play the song for you, but that's your homework assignment. If I played it, it would make this reading NC-17, and I want to keep it G. So it's the naughtiest lyrics ever. And then the song is called Shave 'Em Dry. Do you know this? Oh, of course the poets know this. And this is called When Lucille Bogan Sings Shave 'Em Dry. I blush quicker than a school of blue jack mackerel arranging itself into an orb of dazzle to avoid nips and the gulps from the dolphins who have silently been trailing them, waiting for them to relax. When I hear her growl, her scratch thirst and giggle when she drops swear words pressed to wax, I can't even look my husband in the eye when I ask him to give it a good listen with me. But he does, ever patient, and we both get a light bless of sweat on, a bright address that still maps us to each other after all this time. When I read him the lyrics, the pink of my cheeks is like the pink of an orchid mantis. Just when you least expect it, the pretend flower will reach out and snatch a butterfly from the air. When I say flower, I mean how her song blooms in the cicada electric Mississippi night. When I say pink, I mean nectar. I mean a long kiss, good and sweet. This is Ode to Sitting in a Booth. I missed booths so much during the pandemic, just sitting in a booth. It's the closest thing to a cave. I have to resist this wild urge to carve a name or a word in it. And my favorite way to sit here is with cold vodka and grapefruit juice and whatever bitter concoction you're sipping. Under the table, I'll nudge you with my heels, a sign no stalactite or dripstone will stop us. Bats do not require any energy to claw dangle upside down. All they need is to relax and gravity, and there's plenty of both swirling to go around. No matter how loud this bar, within these three walls, we can drop straight into a very electric flight. We can pretend we don't answer to anyone, including the waitress, and no one even knows where we are. And the last one I'll read is Bodies in the Air. I was thinking of all the ways things in nature jump and move. Bodies in the air. If you want to talk, just say the word, hummingbird. I want to know when you will flick flack from crepe myrtle or beautyberry bush. In Morocco's Erg Chebi Desert, spiders cartwheel down sand dunes, and how can you not smile when you learn there's an Italian insect called Gramina cola that somersaults in the forest? Splash tetras leap from the river and onto leaves fin-stuck, just long enough for eggs to grow and then swell into a very fine fry. Salamanders backflip over the face of a rock to avoid birds, whip their tails up and over, throw their long backs until their tiny forelegs reach up for the clouds. So when you finally speak it in the air and let it leap off, remember, it's the only thing I ever wanted from you. I want to see your words hover in the air. Watch them be the only feathered thing on this blue planet that can zip backwards and even upside down. Thank you.
Amy Nezuka-Matado. That would have been 36 haikus, by the way. Our next poet is Sharon Olds.
Ode to the tampon. Inside out clothing, queen's robe, white jacketed worker who clears the table prepared for the feast which goes uneaten, hospital orderly, straight jacket which takes into its folded wings the spirit of the uncapturable one, soldier's coat, dry dock for the boat not taken, seeker of the red light of stars which have ceased to be before we see them, bloodhound, unhonored one, undertaker, secret keeper. You who in the cross-section diagram before the eyes of a girl, child glide into potential space, out of the second stage rocket's cardboard cylinder, up beyond the atmosphere where no one has gone before. You who began life as a seed in topsoil, you who blossomed into the air like steam from a whale's blowhole, you who were compressed into a dense calyx, nib which dips into a 40-year river, mute calligrapher, we write you here. And the other one I'll read is from this new book called Ballads with a Z. Quarantine. When I left the city for the house in the woods, I got to know the room where I sat, where the oval mirror was balanced vertical, and sometimes a brass ball cast a bent spear of sun onto the glass, which bounced a fish hook onto the ceiling. Outside the window, the black oil seed dangled like the bars of a score, the songbirds in a darting frenzy around them. Elsewhere, people sicken and die. Elsewhere, people starve and thirst and hide by dawn and walk by evening and perish, and their parents perish. I try to hide from knowing that. I send money, I send for a cotton dress for the hot weather, for the eating and drinking and writing, describing the luxuries of my vantage point in plenty and safety. I do not give enough, and my taxes are spent by the orange cockatoo in the white man house on bailing out bankers. Okay, spend the rest of the day sending money to the hungry. Pay back a tithe of what generations of my family stole. I am of a people of thieves and beaters of children. I was not beaten because of my race, but because I belonged to my mother, and I was a girl and a child, and obedient, I mean sane. I never thought of saying no to her until I was a head taller than my mother. And I did not deserve to be beaten, but now I see it. I have not ever in my life been beaten outside my gender or my family or my color.
Sharon Olds. Our next poet is Willie Perdomo.
Good evening, bienvenido. Mic check, can you hear me in the back? It's amazing, man. You spend half your life trying to get out of Dodge, and where you end up, right in the heart of Dodge. Thank you to Martin. Good luck as you move into the next stanza. I want to give a special shout out to my hermana Isabel. Thank you for the work you put into this. This is from the Crazy Bunch, and it's along those lines of the poet Forrest. I said, talking about you can only see things when you turn it into tragedy, and this is somewhat in that vein. So I'm going to read them back to back. The first poem is called Head Crack, Head Crack. And the next poem is called Breaking Night. And when you break night, you sort of hang out all night until you see the sunrise. And it follows a weekend in the lives of 5 young black and Puerto Rican men from East Harlem. Zubang, Olang, Brick City, Fly Diddy, Drug War, Street Noir, War Fat, Bank That, Sneaker Box, Check Account, Get Fresh, Stay Fly, Night Pool, Old School, Stash House, Corner Store, We Cool, No More, Smoked Out, Players Ball, Okie Doke, Flat Broke, Hangout, No Doubt, Blackout, Death Count, Dwight Gone, Tone Gone, Petey Gone, Chino Gone, Body Shot, Chop Shop, Black Hole, Myth Sold, Break That, Like This, Black Cat, Death Kiss, Power Move, Move That, Crush Groove, Dope Shit, Step Back, Get This. In that year of a shot to the head, where were you the first time you broke night? When you break night, you learn that one puff under the right circumstance can give you the right perspective. You learn to pick up stories that fall and slip on the right side of knowing. What is it, a blizzard? That was a summer riff should you be confronted with the choice of fight or fun. The call from the rooftop used to be boom bella boom, and the sky would go back to its specific blue places. The block wakes to sun and skeleton. You could talk to God for free. Waterbread swan dived off groggy trucks, and your soul begged for the breakfast special. Bodega gates slammed open like start guns, and that's when you try to predict the future. A formal wind is all we needed to keep cool. On that Sunday sunrise, we laughed because we saw the light for the first time, the light that breaks bread, and the light the dead sing when it's time for that last surge. The rock doves atop the light post cuckooed our direction home, always north, always uptown. There we were, still wearing our hallway hickeys, and someone had to pay for the Buddha tie, the brown suede ballies, and the party socks. Fuck all those bubblegum chewing, the personal ain't political mornings. It was time to swim. One by one, we picked each other up until there was enough crew to stock a lineup. The park was already fired up with cauldrons of gandules and asopao, all kinds of fricassee and long grain canilla rice served with the story of an uprising, foils and forks, napkins and wipes, gizzards and tripe, the concept of an extended noon, and learning how to feed someone with a long spoon. In the madrugada, we found a big beat, a homeostatic way of hanging out, spin styles and salvation. Word to my mother became our true signature. The math was easy that morning. We wanted to open spots where we could feel syncretic. Language, the old schoolers used to say, was a lemon running up the stairs, a piano plink, an uppercut and right cross. Ain't you something? You the same one we like to say. Metro North rattles, more battles to be won, and part of the game was to be torn out of one's frame. Cherry blossoms caked on Mount Morris, and the M116 rumbled a tune of transfers straight out the depot. Get the sun in your life, son. You're my son because you shine, not because you're mine, son. We ran over the mountain, walked the line on the dead steam pipe like a Walenda. Check it, that's where all the favors go down. The ghost of nasty Rucker Park crossovers, a highlight reel of sucker turnovers, doing it in the park, doing it in the park, oh yeah. We could have been 6 feet under for all we knew, so we hopped the public pool gates and swam 400-meter relays in our soaked boxes, created teams and heats, bets for next, and banged out beats, waiting for our legs. Homeroom and homecomings, study hall and scholastic had lost their appeal. Being cool, being real, crashing hooky sets, being rookied into gang divisions and grown-up talk, that's what we knew of freedom. No regulations, no rules made to fit the latest trend, no rules to regulate the fool in us. That morning, all we wanted to find was a smile at the bottom of the world. Thank you.
Willie Perdomo. Patrick Rosal.
That's tough, Will. Made me follow that. I want to dedicate this poem to the great poet of the anti-apartheid era from South Africa, Don Matera, who we lost this summer. To the great Newark poet that we lost last month, Elijah Bell. And to my father, who died last month. You should know that we grew up speaking only English here in New Jersey, in my family. But my father was fluent in several languages, including Spanish. And when I grew up, I got pretty good at Spanish, let's just say that. And then one year, about 15 years ago, I went down to Argentina. Me and my dad never really got along. And when I was down in Buenos Aires, I called him up, and because I had been speaking Spanish already, I greeted him in Spanish. We had this whole conversation in Spanish. And I realized that it was a language that me and my father had never been angry at one another in. As glass. When these sons of Buenos Aires holler in chorus from the muck-blessed soccer field across the street, they are calling to me in the formal idioms their fathers used to ignore the ubiquitous feral dogs and the beggars of Recoleta. I understand just enough to fling back halfway to the park's paved border their summer-toughened leather ball and return to my hard-floor Palermo flat to phone my dad back in Jersey. Papa, I say, tu hijo habla. Of course, at first, he doesn't recognize my voice or even his own name. For I am speaking to him with an affection whose prepositions point in all the wrong directions. But for 6 full minutes, we are unfamiliar with one another's rage. For once, we are laughing at the same time. It's simple. We don't loathe one another in Spanish like we do in English, a language I've long known for its fluid burn, the way it rises from my father's ankles into his belly, from his torso into his limbs, like molten glass. This is why he and I can glare at one another for decades without moving, all the lexicons of sadness and delight turning cold and hard about every muscle and bone, twisting around the capillaries, flooding the metacarpal nooks, stopping in the esophagus. So, if flesh, sinew, and gut, this human crucible were to fall away, as it must, what's left is the clear anatomy of a man cast in a language gone 77 years unsummoned, the whittled wooden fans of his childhood, his mother's kalesa rocking over vegan cobblestone, a whore's warm breast flushed against him like a good bottle of rum, cracked cathedral windows, some cots and soup, and 400 years of horseshit poured hot through his veins that I am there too. Sitting in a chilly apartment in Palermo, listening to the fading howls from the football field. The bold charity of a foreign tongue, sweetening the image in my mind of this quickly aging man who whacked me and my brother's silly with his leather belt. And down the street, I can still hear those boys teasing one another in lunfardo. Maybe they're not too young to despise their fathers. Maybe they can already taste in the prayers they pretend to say before they sleep that petty venom distilling in their mouths. But not today. Not in this Castilian. For today, this speech of imperial thieves, this dialect of conquerors, this larcenous parlance, I am taking back as my own, and every word of every tenderness I have failed to speak is already rising through my knees as glass. It is ancient, and it is pure. It is not free of bitterness or grief. It is heating my very fingers as I write this. I want to learn to love more fluently, even if it means in English I should shatter into the body of my father. Thank you.
Patrick Rosal. Tom Slay.
Hello. I'm going to read a poem kind of following on from some of the other poets about people who have died. And this one is for Phil Levine. And Franny Levine died this summer, and her memorial service is soon. So Phil and Fran are much on my mind. When Phil was dying, he gave me a phone call and wanted me to come visit him, and so I flew out to see him. And as many of you know, Phil was one of the funniest people on the planet, and totally irreverent, and he certainly died the same way he lived. Because, I went in and I felt a tremendous amount of feeling, and I said to Phil, Phil, I really love you. And it was remarkable because Phil did not wear his emotions on his sleeve. He was not of that generation, and I'm a lot milkier. So Phil said, I really love you too, Tom. And then about a half hour later, you just feel it welling up and you say, Phil, I really love you. And Phil said with a little less enthusiasm, I really love you too, Tom. And then 40 minutes later or whatever it was, Phil, and Phil said, Tom, stop. Let's not use that word. So this poem is called That Word. And the only thing you need to know about Phil that you might not know is that he had a lifelong heart arrhythmia. He sits reading under his desk lamp. He loves how wind distresses tail and mane. He likes the rhymes, internal and irregular. How people from the old days walk in and out of the poem. How the father who dies in one stanza can rise in another. How, despite the drought, the rain keeps falling in 14 lines. His rumpled bed is never not specific as the dent his head leaves in the pillow. He rubs his hand across his jaw, unshaven. His touch on the back of your wrist is delicate and urgent. When you help him up from bed, he isn't shy about holding on. When he lies back down, he grips his water bottle and won't let go. Smiling, says, let's not use that word. It's been used 10,876 times. He shrugs off the weepers, the brotherly lovers, the sour preachers turning purple and blue in their dandruff-sprinkled robes. Out in his backyard in Fresno, the oranges are ripening. At his window in Brooklyn, the plane trees stripped bare of leaves click softly in the breeze. Him in his undershirt, in his tweed jacket, in sweatpants, watching Norbert Szymanski clean and jerk. Now he's throwing rocks on the bridle path. He's turning into a fox. The brush of his tail mocks the pack. He leaps clear of his own tracks, doubles back, loses the lords and ladies riding. Now he's preaching to rats. Showing them pages in holy books, money books, books of the entitled that are good to eat and chew right down. But all alone in his study with ice and sun, he scrolls with his fountain pen, crosses it all out, starts again. And this time, rising up, are the sheared away walls of an abandoned high school, a stack of rusted axles, a diner where nobody talks openly of love, but where ketchup and mockery are served up with the coffee, and his heart, arrhythmic, pulses out of sync, all on its own. And Patrick's father just died. My mother died in April by her own hand. And she came back to me in a dream recently. Wave. The dreamed wave sweeping down on the sleeping city was my mother planning what she planned when she died. I held her hand while she drank down the drugs that made her wave and city. The inundating heaviness of sleep overtaking her, flooding block by block every corner of her mind. The hand I held, I wasn't holding anymore. It lifted out of mine and hovered in the air, hovered like that wave, maybe in benediction, maybe as a nerve tick, completely autonomic, or a gesture beyond anything I know to know or dare. But months after the wave, my mother comes swimming fiercely toward me. As I swim back toward shore, her crawl plying through the water, pushing the wave before her until I call out, "Ma, since when did you learn to swim like that?" "Since I died," she said. "Nothing hurts me anymore, and I feel so much lighter in the water." Meanwhile, the drowned city entered into deeper sleep. Schooling fins whirlpooling all around us. "Son," my mother grimaced, "take my hand if they attack." But when she swam out of sight, leaving me in the middle of the ocean, the deep opened like her old clasp purse, letting loose the sun above the waves, which is when the drowned city rose up out of the sea as if it were built on the back of a sleeping whale that just this instant stirs awake. Thank you.
Tom Slay. So we say the names of the poets before and after they come on, just in case there are some of these folks who you're not that familiar with, so you'll put the name together with the face and the voice and the work and go by their books. Our last poet for this evening is Patricia Smith.
You made it. This is the last. I'm the last one. Thank you, Martin. I want to thank. It's very strange, the energy that courses through your body over there. These are the community of witnesses, and some of us boldly love each other. Some of us reluctantly love each other. Some of us don't know we love each other, but we all love each other. I love you guys. I'm so happy to be here with you. That's the crowd. Okay. Sagas of the Accidental Saint. I don't expect you'll recognize my voice. I don't believe this saga I've suppressed will ever sound familiar. I am just a stooped and accidental saint, no choice except to strain the limits of my throat. I am the mama weep beneath the fold, that paragraph you skip, the wink of gold inside a rotted mouth, that shredding note of grief. Excuse what's inexcusable in me. The shifting wildfire-tinted weave, my ankles blue with fluid, how I grieve in gospel you can't clutch. A fusible display of doubled negatives I spew whenever someone says my child is gone and then goes on to pile the blame upon my child for being gone. Or maybe you believe the wretched mess is rightly traced right back to me, whose body housed the crime. My daughter, out of dollars, out of time, my son just seeking ways to be erased. So many ways they stride into the line of gunfire, tease the trigger, crave the shot, just living through their days as if they're not about to die. He totes a paper bag of wine, or tussles, laughing with his kid, or rolls a joint, or asks his boo to braid his hair while lazing on the stoop, or dares to glare when someone shoves. She fights against the hold around her throat, or somehow looks the same as someone else, or sits inside her car, or someone else's car, or leaves ajar a door she should have closed. He plays a game of hoops to clear his head, or doesn't raise his hands, or raises them, or doesn't stop, or does, or when commanded, fails to drop his wallet, keys, or phone. He sets ablaze a heap of trash, somebody's car or store, while shouting slogans meant to make you care that he's alive. She's killed if she's not there, although she said she'd be, or there before she should have been, or on her way to work, or coming home not walking like she should, not walking down the street she normally would. He walks too close behind. You have to jerk your purse out of the way. You palm the mace. He passes, spitting lyric vile and blue, not giving damns that he's offending you. All you can remember is his race. You ask him to succumb. He dares decline. The situation quickly falls apart. A weapon's raised to line up with his heart because he feels entitled to his spine. She fumbles in her pocket for some change or jumps the A-train turnstile on a dare. She mumbles like her mind is not all there or titters in a way you think is strange. He wrecks his Chevy, waves for help. He calls the 9, the 1. He's waiting wrong. The folks around him says he didn't belong. He coughs or sneezes, looks away. He brawls with brothers, sisters, father, wife. He waves a Walmart toy, or he can't find his place in line. He laughs too loud. He can't retrace his steps. He droops his pants. He misbehaves. She turns her back or whirls around, or could be packing, could be wanted, could be strong enough to snap your neck. She moves all wrong. He wanders into someone else's hood in colors that he struggles to explain. He prances, strides, he's plotting an escape. He stops and spins on you. He's here to rape your daughter. Or he scoffs when you complain about his smell. He crafts a sign. He parks behind your Chevy, thrusts his massive fist into or through the air. He wakes up pissed but right on time, then smokes a blunt or arcs his brow when someone asks, "You good?" He waits his turn or takes a leak. He takes a break. He frightens everyone with his physique. The situation's bound to escalate. So many ways they're asking not to be. She's wearing out her welcome being black when no one asked her to. You've seen her lack of grace, the space she occupies, her glee when chicken, weed, or welfare chicks roll in. He goes to class, he graduates. He takes the seat right next to you. His shoulder makes you quake inside. You simply don't know when he'll blow. She shops beneath the winking eye of video, but then pays with a card that can't be hers. His chest and arms are scarred with scrape and blood tattoos, so why untie the noose shaped like his neck? His clothes are blue or red. He wants your job. He scoped your wife. He craves your home, your cash, your perfect life. That textbook in his hands not fooling you. She hawks and spits. She begs for change. She blows a harp. She blows through blows. She blows her chance, a victim yet again of circumstance. He's fighting back, but everybody knows that he's too coarse, too dumb, too street, too black, too dense, too doomed, too thick, too much of those, too vicious pose, too quick to come to blows, too likely he could spark your heart attack. He flares his nostrils, hides his hands. He flees without explaining why. She lifts, she steals, she swipes, she grabs, she snatches, cuts a deal. He stumbles, trips, he trips a wire. He sees too much, she needs too much, he feels too much. Her skin's too mud, his skin's too light. He fights too dirty, fights for breath. The savage nights are huge with him, the voodoo in his touch. He shoots himself while handcuffed to a pole, or hangs himself while hanging from a tree, or wrings his neck although his hands aren't free. He always seems to fail at self-control. He's monster, ogre, he's the looming threat, insisting he didn't do that thing he did, denying that she'd hidden what she hid, confusing you by getting so upset. He claims he's innocent. He files a case. He lives too large, too long. He must believe that he is white or free. He's so naive. With every step he takes, he falls from grace. He steps inside or out, or through or down. She bellows, jumps or hisses, struts or spins. He stalks a street, steps off a curb. His sin should be enough to drive him out of town, where he'd be out of sight and out of mind and out of bounds, but thankfully not out of range. And if you think he's all about the kill, the drops, the guns and gangster grind, you know for sure as soon as you see me, his mama, grieving ugly, wailing about my child, but plucking Jesus out of every bag. You just can't see why he deserves such stupid love. My wailing thrust, each Lord have mercy on my baby's soul, my sad theatrics as my child goes cold. And then the hungry cameras readjust my howls until it's not my child who's dead, but something feral, edged in leek, a threat to shrubbery and Sundays. While he's wet and seeping into street, they frame his head and mine inside a single shot and ask my nappy hair and bulging eyes just what I think. I keen, implode on cue. They cut the camera back to frame my blooded mask and splay. You don't remember what I say or hear his name, but you are borderline obsessed with my collapse, my crumpled wine and holy ghosted flail, the matinee of mama. You are entertained until you aren't. And then I'm just an open maw, a blur and tongue. You shouldn't waste your awe on my unleashed display of overkill. Ignore the blackish bruiser dripping bile, the spittle spewing me, still bellowing, my Lord, my child, why would you let this thing disrupt your day? I disappear. And while I'm relegated to an anecdote on way to nothing, all you can recall is sputtered gospel woe and caterwaul, the corpse, the tightened wire around my throat. That's my son collapsed there, my son crumpled there, my son lying there, my son positioned there, my daughter repositioned there, my daughter as exhibit A there, my daughter dumped over there, my son hidden away there, my son blue there, my son dangling there, my son caged there, my daughter on the gurney there, on the slab there, in the drawer there, my son splayed there, my son locked down there, my son hanging there, my son bleeding out there, my son growing frigid there, my daughter deposited there, my son inside the chalk there, my daughter being bagged there, my son on the slab there, my son crushed there, my son rearranged there, my son crumpled in the door there, my daughter's neck shrinking in the noose there, my son's left eye over there, my son as exhibit B there, my son behind the wheel there, my son under the wheel there, my son slumped over the wheel there, my son, my daughter, blooded and not moving, in the doorway, on the stoop, down the block, in front of her kids, just inside the barbershop, face down in the street, outside the bodega, inside the bodega, in the black alley behind the bodega, on the videotape, a block from home, leaving home, hanging out at home, in the schoolyard, on the blacktop, in his bed, in her kitchen, in my arms, in my arms, in my arms. That's my son, shot to look thug. That's my daughter, shot to look more animal, shot as kill, shot as prey, shot as conquest, shot as solution, shot as lesson, shot as warning, shot as comeback, shot as payback, shot for sport, shot for history. That's my son not being alive anymore there. That's my child coming to rest one layer below the surface of the rest of my life. There.
Patricia Smith. Let's give a round of applause to all our poets for tonight. We're here for 3 more days. There are 60 more poets in the program that you did not hear tonight. Come back Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There are readings, conversations, music and poetry collaborations. It is the most amazing festival in the United States. And I don't just say that because I work here. Come back. Happy to see you. Happy to be here with you again in 3D. Thank you. Get home safe.